Wholeness, welcome. This is Josh, integrating presence, inner skilled, and welcome to today's event. And today's event is titled Ill Will, Intent, and Consent Regarding Metta. And there's a barking dog. So let's just spend a few moments wishing ourselves well, wishing those around us well. And however you want to do that, I use the phrases, may you be happy and joyful, may be healthy and strong, may be safe inside and out. May you live knowing peace and ease, and may you realize awakening and be free. So you can visualize either yourself, others around you, loved ones, dear ones, and use some of these phrases, but also feel it in the heart, in the energy towards them, towards yourself. It's an offering of goodwill, well-wishing. Okay, you're welcome to continue doing this while I do today's event, which is going to be a short one. And I have as a description, this event aims to explore mainly 3 often overlooked areas of the potentially many aspects of metta or loving kindness or goodwill on a conceptual level and in practice. One is how its opposite of ill will comes into play. Another is the notion of consent on the levels of intention, energy, etc. And thirdly, exploring if there's a baseline to metta and if there's a deep end to metta. All right. Well, what I have here for this one is, let's start with, well, first off, a disclaimer. So the disclaimer I have is, I don't want this in any way whatsoever to detract from your metta practice, to sow seeds of doubt. Also, no seeds of division at all. So if any of this, what I'm going to say, which is kind of put things under a spiritual microscope, this is not where we live from. Where we live from is the place we did at the beginning here, our regular method practice and goodwill. But for sake of curiosity, let's say, I am going to put this under a microscope, just some things, but it's in order to help one's metta practice and to, yes, increase faith, not doubt, and to cause concord and harmony and unison. So anything at all happens to go against that comes up for you, let that drop off and drop away. That's not the intent here. So the first one here is pretty straightforward. Where does ill will come into play? Well, this one will happen sometimes when we're just doing regular metta practice for ourselves, for loved ones, for others, for neutral people, and especially with those who are challenging, or maybe are enemies, or maybe we're their challenging person. And even though we want to try to have goodwill towards them, sometimes the opposite will come up. We'll have memories. This person did this and this. How could they? How dare they? They don't deserve my goodwill. And then I think, oh, I might be a bad person. I'm supposed to be practicing loving kindness. So this is okay, because this is part of the process that comes up during metta sometimes. And I look at this as a purification process, meaning that these things that lay kind of dormant and hidden sometimes will surface in order to be seen and known and healed and released. So especially if you have the intention, oh, I don't want that. I want to work through that. So that's the most important point. So these opposite things of ill will can come up, the exact opposite, but as long as the intention is there to move through that, to heal that, to work through it, to work with it, and see the benefits of when we can wish someone well, then this is not a problem, I feel. It's a problem when it kind of goes unseen, unnoticed, and undealt with, and then it's kind of more unconscious or subconscious, and it's affecting maybe playing influence in our behavior and how we interact with the world. And these levels, I think, seem to go really deep, especially when they're real subtle. I mean, even these little notions of, not that it's wrong per se, uh, irritation, annoyance, just like get it away from me. I don't want this, aversion type things. And now I'm not talking about aversions to like really unskillful action. I don't think there has to be anything personal with being averse to really harmful, unskillful actions. I think that's a really helpful thing. So that's not what I'm talking about when we aversion. Aversion means that my heart is not in the best state that it could be for myself and others when I kind of want to push something away just because I don't like it, because it makes me feel uncomfortable. And I would prefer to have something different another way. So that's what I mean. So then our heart is in a state of like, in a state that it's not the most optimal idea for myself and others. And again, this is a practice. This is not something to beat ourselves up with and judge ourselves over. So, yes. Now I will jump to the third one here because it ties into this of, is there a baseline and a deep end? I was in a meditation retreat where the instructor said that a lack of ill will is the deep end, which is in a way wild because there's a Theravada teacher monastic that says that's the baseline. Not having, well, I guess that's my interpretation of it. Basically saying if there's a lack of ill will, that's loving kindness. You don't need to actually, oh, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be joyful. It's just an absence of ill will. That's loving kindness. So when this instructor said, the deep end of metta practice is an absence of ill will, I just, this is not computing for me in a way, because this is totally possible. And the historical Buddha said, which I think is really brilliant, the only thing he said to slay or to harm is ill will. So it's like using this energy of aggression, um, I don't know, sometimes arrogance, maybe, hostility, and turning it back on itself, wanting to hurt or harm, and slay that wanting to hurt or harm itself. So it's brilliant. It's not fighting against that energy. It's turning it back on itself to eradicate it. Now, of course, this doesn't mean if we're being abused or harmed that we don't set boundaries and protect ourselves and remove ourselves from situations. That's not what I mean here either, because that's really important for people who just say, oh, I'm just not being loving enough. Maybe if I just love more, it will go away, or I'll stop. This certain abusive behavior will stop. No, it's teaching us to get out of these situations, I feel. So this notion of a baseline. Now, what do we do? So I don't know what to say. I'm not going to leave that open-ended. Um, you know, I'm not really going to weigh in how I feel much more beyond that. But what I will say here is, if someone is really harmful, how do we practice, loving kindness to us? And this is a really valid question that gets talked about a lot. And I like Thanissaro Bhikkhu's response here in basically saying, may you soon realize the errors of your ways and change your behavior. So it's a real straightforward, honest approach of how these things are done, right? Because it just doesn't, it has to feel authentic and it has to be practical and reasonable. So for me to pretend that I'm going to be lovingly kind to someone who's not behaving in a way that's helpful and actually harmful towards me and others, then it's not just going to be the most natural, easy thing for all of us to just say, "Oh, yeah, he may be well, may be happy, may be helpful, peaceful." So in those instances, I think it does make sense to say, "Yes, may you." Not from a place of arrogance or high and mightiness, but from a realistic standpoint. Okay, may you soon realize the errors of your ways and change your behavior, for your own sake and for the sake of everyone around you. So I think that's how we can realistically practice loving kindness towards really people who are still in really their behaviors is still really being harmful. Okay, now this second one I mentioned, or the third one here, is um, what is this notion of consent on the levels of intention, energy, etc. So now this is a one that I'm going to kind of phrase in questions because the notion of consent, this usually crops up or could only crop up like in group settings. So if you have a teacher and then you have a group that you find yourself in, you're practicing metta. So we know in the medical industry, right, there's a thing called informed consent. And informed consent, from what I understand, don't take this as legal advice or medical advice or anything. It's basically that the healthcare professional needs to say, okay, here's what we know about this substance. Here are the potential um, benefits and drawbacks. And this is what could happen to you if you do engage in this either substance or medical regimen. And here's what you're getting yourself into should you choose to do this. And we know that this is not done all the time. And I think one of the ways some practitioners might weasel out of it, maybe that's too strong a word, is that they get this package insert in the medication at the pharmacy, and then that kind of legally absolves them. You're responsible to read this before you ingest the pill, which I guess is okay, but not everybody's willing to do that. So I find it really helpful if the healthcare professional were to just level with someone and tell them in plain English what the risks are. Of course, we're not going to always know all the risks because everyone is unique in their makeup is and what they've epigenetics, all this stuff, I guess. So, but it's a notion that they care and that nothing is perfect and that there are risks involved in everything. So, with that said, how might this come into play in a metta um, community where you're practicing goodwill towards others in a group? Well, I don't. So I'll just frame this in questions. Like I said, what if there are certain types of energies within a group that may have different outcomes and things happening other than what one kind of expects or thinks that may happen, and what are we to do about that? So hopefully no one has ever experienced like a sociopathic behavior in a leader or anything like that, or even suspect. But what if there is a suspect there of that someone is telling you something, but their underlying intentions and energy is something else? What do we do in those situations? Or what if we suspect that may be the case? So this is where I find that sitting, if that was the case, just saying, okay, this is my intent for doing this practice. They might be saying one thing, but doing something else or meaning something else. I don't consent to that. And what I do is this is my intention. So may everything that's not in alignment with that consent and intention be transformed into that, because whether someone keeps something hidden from me or not is not my concern. I don't consent to that. And consent, I feel, is a significant thing, especially when it comes to energy and as well as our intent. It makes a difference. So what, and then um, not saying anything or not being conscious of something, then the other person might consider that tacit consent, meaning if you don't consciously say anything or oppose it, then you're going along with the intended consent of the person leading whatever they're leading. So this doesn't have to be done out loud, I don't think, and make a scene about it or anything like that. But I do feel it's something worth investigating how our intent and what we consent to has a role to play, at least, if not an energetic outcome of what's going on. Um, yeah. So I think, well, we're already past 15 minutes. I think that's, unless I'm missing something here, I think that's all these little tiny nuances I wanted to cover about metta practice. If anyone has any questions, comments, anything they'd like to share, I'm supposed to ask for donations. I've got that up there. I'll throw up another thing here of, let's see here, a meditation I've done in the um, members. Wow, I'm struggling for words here today. um, does anyone have any questions about metta practice, well-wishing, especially when it comes to these things of intent and consent, and what if what really what is well-wishing? Is there a deep end to this, and how ill will might come into play here? All right. Well, thank you all for joining, and I appreciate your practice, your metta practice, your well-wishing. And again, this is not just some kind of, I don't know, hoity-toity, wishy-washy, new agey thing. This is an energetic reality that we can feel in our own hearts, and that people will recognize in us, that they will feel safe around us, that they can, you can see and you can put this to the test of how it is when our own heart is in this space, and our own heart starts getting transformed into to wellness and well-being and well-wishing and goodness. And the world needs so much of this right now. And it's also very protective and very powerful. So with that, may you all wish each other well, wish yourself well, wish your whoever is the subject of your metta well. Actually, I'm just now remembering another type of controversial thing that I might want to mention. So when we do, before I get into that, Evangeline says, I have a question. What about it when when being too passive gives someone else the permission to run over us? Very good question. Let me come back to that before I forget this other thing. So when we practice metta towards, it's usually towards oneself, a dear loved one where it's easy to connect, and then a neutral person, meaning there's no energetic charge one way or another, kind of like somebody you see on the street you've never seen before, and then an enemy, and then all beings everywhere. So it's pretty clear and straightforward. The intent and consent for oneself. Yes, I have total consent and intent for myself usually, right? And then for all beings everywhere, it's this kind of abstract idea almost, and you're not targeting, quote unquote, or just lack of a better word, one individual. So now, I'm not saying this is the case in that you should stop practicing metta this way, because this is the way I do it. But what if um, someone is directing something at me, even if it's metta? But what if I don't want that type of metta, or what they're sending to me? I'm not having consent over whether the person does that, am I? So, does that factor in or play in any way? Um, So what happens when I don't get consent to someone who I'm practicing metta towards, do I need to ask their permission before I start practicing metta towards them? And I'll answer my own question here. It is kind of a ridiculous question because when we go up and talk to someone, we just start talking. We don't say, hey, well, I mean, not all the time, but hey, can I talk to you? Hey, can I exist in front of you? Right? I don't need to ask their permission to exist in front of me. So, but it is an interesting thing that came up. Um, Somehow to with someone that I just had not even occurred to not even thought of that too. And also this notion of receiving metta, usually a metta practice is giving well wishing towards others. But what about the receiving end of, okay, all these beings are practicing metta at any given time. What if I take that in? But then again, what are we taking in? What if the discernment's not there? And that what I'm taking in is it might be cloaked as metta, but it's actually a more less benevolent energy. How do I know the difference? How do I need to discern that? What should I let in? What should I not? How much energy should I be devoting to discerning that or disregarding that? So this is another notion of intent and consent when it comes to metta, and I don't really have any good answers for this. I would say trust your heart, ask other teachers, ask your friends about this if you'd like, but yeah, unless you get a huge red flag, then I say at least as far as practicing towards others, it's totally okay. That's the way I feel, even if you're not asking for their permission. So, but I thought I'd mention it anyway. So back to Evangeline's question. Um, what about what about it when being too passive gives someone else the permission to run over us? So I need to ask some follow-up questions here if you're still here, Evangeline. So I would love to have a specific example. I kind of get the what about if? Uh, oh, yeah. So if you could give me a specific example without being too personal or giving away personal information, I get the general idea, right? We've got this notion in society that I need to be strong. I can't let anybody in. I need to be active in order to protect myself. You know what I mean? Um, so the first, and yeah, maybe that'd be helpful, but a lot of times maybe not. But the first thing is there actual harm or abuse here? If there is, abuse is never okay. And you need to do whatever you need to do to get out of that situation. If it means going and staying on a friend's couch, even filing a restraining order. I mean, it sounds maybe dramatic or something, but abuse is not okay. And that needs to be dealt with immediately. There's really no exception to that whatsoever. Um, so, yeah, just someone being too bossy, aggressive. Okay. So then I feel like asking questions, oh, well, why is this person being bossy and aggressive? Where's my role in this? What should I do about it? How does this feel? Is this person open to having a conversation about being bossy and aggressive? How can it be done in a civilized manner if it can't be done in a civilized manner? Um, you know, this is kind of a tough one. Um, so there's a famous teaching in the suttas that I find helpful too. If someone's being angry, someone came up to the Buddha and they said he just started just being really irate and angry towards them, and the Buddha said, "Hey, when someone gives you a gift, what happens to that gift if the person doesn't receive the gift? Who does it belong to then? Who does it then belong to?" And he said, "Oh, it belongs to the giver then." And he said, "In the same way, I don't accept your anger. I don't accept it. So then it's not mine. It belongs to you." So, I mean, that's one technique I found too. If someone is angry towards me, I don't have to accept it. I don't have to feed back into the drama. So the one thing that helped me a lot too is that when I don't respond to drama won't respond to me. So usually the person will keep at something if one plays into the drama because it kind of feeds on itself. Some people get reaction. I don't know this person. I would have to meet this person and kind of observe it in real life, because I don't really know about generalities, per se. But some people feed on this notion of dominance and control and aggressiveness and bossiness. They get off on it. They use it as an energy. There's a You can look up narcissistic stuff. I don't know if this applies to narcissistic, um, but I don't necessarily, the way it's taught to is not necessarily have to be too aggressive nor passive, but be assertive in establishing and maintaining boundaries. It's like, I'm not going to allow you to talk to me that way. I don't have time for this. This is not how I'm going to be treated, and I'm not going to stand for this. And do it in a polite and kind way that you can. That's authentic. So yeah, there is something though being too passive to just really stating how you feel. And okay, when this happens, I'm feeling like this now, and feelings can never be wrong. So we can always express how one feels. I find it helpful not to blame the other person for how I'm feeling, but just start sharing how I feel when certain things like this happen. And then if the person doesn't respect that, then that tells you about them. And I think the boundaries need to be asserted and maintained, because yeah, that's right. If we don't have boundaries and people aren't respecting our boundaries, well, then they do that, and then those boundaries need to be made and enforced, I think. Yes, assertive, and it's not always the best strategy, but if one does feel they're being too passive, and someone is dominating a situation, then I feel that yes, we can assert boundaries and then maintain them and keep saying, no, this is where I stand. If you don't recognize this, then I'm going to have someone here help me, or I'm going to have to get away because I can't do this. And it also depends what type of relationship it is too. So it's appropriate if this is a boss, if this is a friend, if this is a family member, if this is a lover, if this is an ex, all these different types of relationships, um, they make a difference on how to go about this. So, this human thing is can be quite complex and quite easy at times, and everywhere in between. So, hopefully a little bit of that helped, Evangeline, and I appreciate the question. It's a really important one. And just know that passivity is not a weakness either. And uh, or that this false notion, oh, I'm doing this and I'm attracting this type of thing to me. I don't find that helpful either. Mara says, hello, I also have a question. Do metta and praying have something in common? You know what? I think so. As far when it comes to the heart, when we're wishing someone well, or when we're offering a prayer, how does it feel? Does it feel like there's goodness, a well wishing, you know, a lack of ill will? Then I think, yeah, it doesn't really matter if we do a formal metta practice, that we call it metta or loving kindness, or if we're offering a prayer in the spirit of that, the spirit of goodness and goodwill. So yeah, I think you feel into your heart and see the commonalities to this. Yeah, I know there's a beautiful prayer by Shanti Deva I heard the other day again, and it's just like, I have to look it up. Just something like, may I be, may all blind people see, may crops have water, may there be fruitful harvest, may all afflictions, people have afflictions and suffering, may they end, may I be a refuge for those in need. This wonderful intentional heart quality of wanting to put more goodwill and goodness and well-being in the world. And so if we offer that as a prayer, or if we do it as a traditional metta practice, or just less ill will, less, um, yeah, yeah, less harboring ill will. Be kindness, just kindness to ourselves too. So yeah, it's a good question, and yeah, I don't think we need to stick to hard line things to have something qualify as something else. Yeah, you know it in your heart, you feel it in your heart. So okay, all right, guys. No, you're welcome, Maria. Thanks for asking the question. All right, guys. May your metta practice be optimal, and may it benefit all beings everywhere, including yourself. May all beings everywhere realize awakening and be free.